Hi friends, in today's session, we are going to talk about a policy which was recently approved by the Union Cabinet, policy which has been in the news. We're going to talk about the National Education Policy of 2020. Before we try to understand each of the provisions and what are the positives and negatives, we first need to understand why this policy is significant. Now, what exactly are policies? Now, different sectors are there in the economy, and time and again, you will come across policy for different sectors. Now, what is the reason why the government comes out with policies? You would have heard about these policies, right? In 2017, there was this National Health Policy. Before that, we have policies for other sectors, policy for the energy sector, policy for electronics and IT sector, those kind of things we have seen in the past. Now, policies, they basically set the goals, they set a roadmap that what needs to be achieved in the next few years, maybe in the next few decades. And again, on the basis of the policy, you can have an action plan, and again, government will come up with different kind of schemes and provisions to give effect to that policy. Now, this policy, the National Education Policy, is significant in this regard as well. We have had National Education Policy in the past as well. We had National Education Policy in 1968, then we had a policy in 86. So it has been almost more than 30 years now that we haven't had National Education Policy. The last one was in 1986. And just think of it, between 1986 and 2020, how many things would have changed. 1986 was the time when we hadn't ushered in liberalization, privatization, globalization. It was the pre-liberalization era. So after 90s, things have massively changed. We have opened up our own economies. We have got the interaction between India and different other countries has increased massively. Apart from that, there has been huge changes when it comes to technology. So our societies, our economy has changed, our technology have changed. So what we were teaching before 90s, what we are teaching now, they are completely different. And it is not just about the content of what we are teaching. The way education is being imparted now is completely different. And in fact, since things are changing at a very fast rate, we also have to adapt accordingly. So there was definitely a need for a new education policy for a long time now. And there have been different committees formed. There have been different organizations which have also independently carried out different research related to the status of our education. And many of them had flagged different issues with our present education system, with our present education infrastructure, with learning outcomes. And these problems continued, and we had to find out solutions. And this National Education Policy, the current policy that has been accepted, takes many of these things into consideration, takes many of these issues into consideration. Now, what have been some of the committees that we have had in the past which have flagged many issues? Recently, there was this T.S.R. Subramaniam committee report, which also talked about many issues and it also gave different recommendations. Before that, we had a draft education policy. Before that, we have had different standing committees of parliament who have looked into these issues. Yashpal committee was there, which specifically studied the higher education sector. And time and again, we have had many other non-governmental organizations, for example, Pratham, which does an annual survey of education report, which has a very good reputation, does extensive research. It also, from time to time, has evaluated our education system and has come up with some interesting findings. So many issues have been there in our education sector, which needs to be rectified. The National Education Policy can probably rectify many of these things. Also, we have to be in sync with the times. Things have changed drastically. What was there in 1986 and what we are teaching, the way we are teaching, might not be relevant in the present context. So all these things make the National Education Policy extremely significant. So what we will do is, in this session, we will look at first the provisions of the National Education Policy. And here, first we will look at the provisions related to the school education. Then we will look at provisions related to higher education. And then we will look at some other dimensions. And then we will understand how this particular policy is good. And also we'll see what are some of the challenges, what can be some of the issues, what are some of the lacunas. So this is going to be the broad structure of the session. Let's start with the school education part. What all has been included in this National Education Policy? What are the important provisions related to school education? First thing, the National Education Policy talks about restructuring the school curriculum. At present, the kind of model that we have, 10+2, first 10 years of education, standard 1 to standard 10, and then you have those the plus 2, 11, and the 12 standard. Now, what they're saying is we need to revamp it, and we need to divide it into 4 stages, and they're saying that we should have a 5-3-3-4 model. That means first 5 years, a particular kind of education needs to be provided. Then next 3 years, a particular kind of education. Then 3 years, then 4 years. So rather than having 10+2, have 5-3-3-4. So first 5 years, that is between the age category 3 to 8 years, that will be the first 5 years of education, and it is going to be the foundational stage. So it is going to lay the foundation for the remaining part of education. Here it is very interesting to note that they are including the age category 3 to 6 years as well as part of education. Now, how it is different? In the past, we have had a Right to Education Act. According to that, children should be provided free and compulsory education between the age category 6 to 14 years. But now what we are saying that we have to move to another model which includes 5+3+3+4 years of education, and it starts from the age of 3. So you are starting from age 3, you are ending in the age 18, at the age 18. So focus on education now will be from the age 3 to 18. So this is a significant departure. Right to Education was saying something, National Education Policy has expanded it further. So first 5 years will be foundational stage. The next 3 years, that will be for the age category 8 to 11 years, that will be the corresponding standard classes will be 3 to 5. It is going to be the preparatory stage. Then the next 3 years is going to be the middle stage. This is for the age category 11 to 14 years. The corresponding classes is 6 to 8. And the next 4 years is going to be the secondary stage. It is for the age category 14 to 18 years. And the corresponding classes will be 9 to 12. So they have defined the classes and the corresponding age. But why this is relevant? Can you just think of it? What is the relevance of this? Now, we have discussed this in the past as well. The annual survey of education report by Pratham, the last report, the 2019 report, also pointed out that in India, you will have kids who are enrolled in different classes, but they are belonging to different age group. For a particular age group, you should be enrolled in a particular class. But you will find that children who are older in age, children who are younger in age, for a particular class are enrolled in the same class. You will find kids, as per their age, they should be enrolled in standard 1. Let's say you are 6-year-old. Ideally, you should be enrolled in standard 1, but they will be enrolled in some other class. If you are, let's say, 4-year-old, ideally, you should not be enrolled in standard 1, but they will be enrolled in standard 1. And there are a variety of reasons why this happens. So all these things has been streamlined here, and the focus of education has been expanded from 3 to 18 years. Now, next thing, this is something which has been pointed out in previous and some other committee reports as well. For example, the T.S.R. Subramaniam report also focused on this, mentioned this thing. There needs to be a focus on preschool education. You need to have early childhood care and education. This has to be a priority area. Now, RT talked about education for the age category 16 to 14 years. Now, what they're saying, it should be provided education before the age 6 years as well. Those who are in the age category 3 to 6 years, they also need to be provided some form of education. Children should be provided different kind of play-based and activity-based learning. Those who are in the age category 3 to 6 years. Now, what is the reason why these kind of things, these kind of learning should be provided? See, 85% of brain development, a child's cumulative brain development, happens before the age of 6. So the cognitive development is happening before the age of 6. And if children are engaged in these kind of activities, it can help in cognitive development, which in turn can help in the development of different kind of other skills which is required at later stages. For example, it can help in reading skills, it can help in numeracy skills. This is something which was also pointed out in the ACER report, the annual status of education report by Pratham. The 2019 report talks about that. So that is the reason you have to focus on kids' education not only in the age category 6+, but also in the age category 3 to 6. And here again, a specific kind of education need to be provided. Who's going to provide this education? According to this policy, Anganwadis can provide it. Standalone Anganwadis. Sometimes Anganwadis within primary schools they can provide it. Sometimes pre-primary sections of existing primary schools can provide it. Standalone preschools can also provide it. So through these channels, preschool education, early childhood care and education can be provided. But what will be the content of this education? What kind of play-based, activity-based learning will be provided? This is something that will be decided by NCERT. So NCERT will develop a national curricular and pedagogical framework for that. And who is going to deliver it? So the policy says that the Anganwadi workers, they will be provided a 6-month training, and after that, those who are successful in this training program, they will be provided a certificate, and they will be the ones who will provide this early childhood care and education. These are few dimensions. Apart from that, the policy also talks about, it recognizes the issue of lack of equity in education that is there at present. There are certain sections of the population who have not been able to benefit or who have not been able to access education, even though we have had a Right to Education Act for some time. As per Right to Education Act, education, those who are in the age category 6 to 14 years should be provided free compulsory education, and they should have easy access to education. But despite that, we have seen that not everyone has equal access to education. In fact, what has happened is enrollment has become almost 100%. Now almost every kid is getting enrolled in school education. There is universal enrollment. But the problem is many kids, they drop out at subsequent stages. There was one study which pointed out that if 10 kids are getting enrolled in school education, 4 out of 10 kids will drop out before they reach 8th standard. So retaining kids has been one of the major challenge for our education sector, and the gross enrollment ratio for some specific sections of the population has been really bad. Gross enrollment ratio, we know that, right? For in a particular age category, how many of the kids should be enrolled in school education? So this is something which has been declining. And what makes things worse is this declining is more among certain sections. It is more among female candidates, transgender candidates. It is more among among people having some specific social cultural identities. For example, people belonging to the Dalit sections, people belonging to the children belonging to the tribal communities. It is also more among those who are in specific geographies. For example, those who are staying in difficult terrain. It is among some who are having some specific socio-economic identities, those who are from the rural areas, for example. Children with disabilities, among them also gross enrollment ratio is less. It has been declining. So this is what the national education policy recognizes, and it also gives some suggestions. It also provides some possible policy solutions. It says that we need to have targeted approach for these communities, special schemes, provisions for these communities who have shown decline in gross enrollment ratio. Apart from that, it says that we need to have special education zones. Certain zones can be demarcated. These zones are those zones where you have overlap of these kind of communities among who are extremely vulnerable when it comes to access to education. So if there is one particular area, one particular region where you have significant proportion of disadvantaged groups, you need to declare that area as a special education zone and have different kind of concerted efforts. Apart from that, they're saying that gender inclusion fund needs to be created so that female and transgender students can be provided different kind of support, they can be provided different kind of assistance. So these are some measures to ensure universal coverage and inclusivity in our education. Now, next thing, as has been pointed out numerous times, we have seen that children are getting enrolled in education, but the learning outcomes has not been good. In fact, children, those who are enrolled in 5th standard, they're not even able to do arithmetic sums for 2nd standard. Children who are enrolled in 5th standard, they're not able to read textbook of 2nd standard. All these things have been flagged by different committees and different organizations who do independent survey of education, research on education sector. They have found this thing. So foundational literacy, numeracy, these are things which have been a challenge. In fact, the national education policy says that there are over 5 crore children who lack this, who lack foundational literacy and numeracy. So what they're saying is all state governments, they need to prepare implementation plans so that children do not lack in foundational literacy and numeracy. So by 2025, the plan should be such that by 2025, all children who have been lacking in foundational numeracy and literacy, they should not be lacking along these lines. They should be able to do basic things, basic reading skills, things, basic arithmetic problems they should be able to solve. And it says that we need to create a national repository of high quality resources in the government's e-learning platform, Diksha. The name of the platform is Diksha. Apart from that, the curriculum also needs to be revamped. The content of the curriculum has been massive. We teach our students a lot of things. Many of these things are actually factual things. So what they're saying is we need to revamp this curriculum. The curriculum load should be reduced, and we should only be focusing on the core content. A lot of things are there which are not necessary. Only the core content you can focus on. Apart from that, what needs to be inculcated among students is critical thinking. They should be able to question things. They should have rational thinking. They should not accept things just as they are. They should be critical in their approach. Also, our education curriculum should be such that it should promote discussion, it should promote analysis-based learning. So children should have more flexibility when it comes to the choice of their subjects. Now, another suggestion has been related to the medium of instruction. Which language children should be learning? What should be the language in which education should be delivered to children? This has been something which is controversial. Now, what the policy says is, it says that children find it easier to learn if they are imparted education in their mother tongue, in their local language. So they are saying that at least till 5th standard, you should be imparting education in the local language or mother tongue. And they're saying it should preferably be till 8th standard, but at least it should be till 5th standard. And they're saying that we need to whatever 3-language formula is there, it needs to continue. And you would have learned about 3-language formula post independence India. If you have studied, you would be knowing about it. Apart from that, they're saying that what should be these 3 languages? It should be left to the choice of the states and the student. They should have a say over there. But there's one thing you should keep in mind, that at least 2 of these languages should be native to India. You can also teach foreign languages, but ensure that you're also focusing on Indian languages. 2 of 3 languages should be from India. But yeah, by and large, what they've done is they have left it to the states to decide which languages should be taught, and it is up to the states whether they should be imparting education to children in the local language or not. But it has led to some controversy. We'll see that in a while. Next thing, how should students be assessed? What kind of examination evaluation system that we should have? So they're saying that board exams should be conducted, but they should only be testing the core concepts, and students should be given flexibility. Students should be given options. They can choose what subjects they want to study, what subjects they can be evaluated on, and children should be given the flexibility of writing the examination multiple times a year. So they're saying that at least you should have 2 occasions in a given year to write the exams, and they're saying the exams should be conducted at multiple stages. For example, there should be exams for 3rd standard, for 5th standard, 8th standard. But yeah, point to be noted is, if you are having an exam, if you're having a board kind of exams for children who are in 3rd standard, it is not to evaluate the kids as such. It is more to evaluate our own system. So whatever results you are getting for the examination in grade 3, it will be used for improvement in the school education system. Maybe you have some learnings from that. Maybe you can understand whether children are performing as they're expected, and if they're not performing as per expected, that means maybe our education system is not working well. So maybe you need to revamp that. Then they also have some suggestions related to teacher training and management. So they're saying that we need to also rethink about our teacher training programs. Right now, we have all these bachelors in education, masters in education. So what they're saying is we need to have a 4-year integrated bachelors in education program, and we need to have high quality content. We need to have practical training modules. Pedagogy is also very important. Apart from that, teachers should have a minimum of 50 years of continuous professional development training every year. And teachers, generally it is observed in the Indian context, teachers are asked to do many other non-teaching activities. For example, they might have to carry out different election duties. Other programs also, right now when this pandemic was raging, in fact, this is going on now also, teachers have been assigned different kind of other roles. For example, in some states, teachers have been asked to go from door to door and find out what is the health status of the members of the family members of each of these households. So many other non-teaching activities are assigned to them. So the policy says that teachers should not be involved in non-teaching administrative activities. They have some specific role to play. They should be focusing on that. Apart from that, excessive teacher transfer is something that needs to be avoided. That should be stopped. What is the reason for this? Now, see, teachers, they teach students. That is part of their role. But at the same time, teachers also continuously see how the children are doing well, or whether they're doing well or not. And if they can act as a mentor, they can act as guide to children. But if they are continuously transferred from one place to another, so they cannot see this trajectory. They cannot understand what is an issue with the child, how a child is performing over a period of time. They cannot notice all these things. So it can impact the performance of the child as well. So excessive teacher transfer is something which needs to be avoided. It needs to be stopped. Apart from that, what can be done to improve governance of schools? Now, as per the Right to Education Act, so what was the aim of the Right to Education Act? It wanted to ensure that children have access to education. So there were some provisions according to which you need to have schools within a particular distance of any human habitat. So if there is a village, so there has to be school within a particular distance. It will ensure that kids in that village can access schools. One of the unintended consequences of this was there were a lot of schools. Had to be established because you have to follow the law. But many of these schools did not have sufficient number of students because obviously there might be a habitat, human settlement, which does not have a lot of children in that school going category. But because of the law, you have to establish that. So as a result of this, many schools had to be established which did not have sufficient number of students. But you have to establish a school. That means you also have to dedicate certain resources over there. You have to have teachers over there. So it led to thinning of resources. I mean, whatever resources the state has, it gets divided into so many number of schools. As a result of which, again, just think of, generally resources are limited, they're scarce. And on top of that, this might not be the most efficient way of utilization of resources. So this is what has been observed by some committees. The Research Development Committee also noted this thing. So right now, the new policy also talks about that. And it says that we probably need to group schools together to form a school complex. Rather than having so many schools, identify ways by which all these schools which have very less number of students, probably they can be grouped together in one school complex. And the school complex can have a secondary school and other schools. It can have Anganwadi in a radius of 5 to 10 kilometers. It will ensure that adequate number of teachers, adequate infrastructure resources will be there, and it can also ensure effective governance of schools. Now, how do we regulate schools? At present, what happens is the Department of School Education is responsible for two activities. It is responsible for governance. It is also responsible for regulation. Now, governance means providing different kinds of services. So it is responsible for providing education, and at the same time, it is responsible for regulating. That means they are providing services. They themselves are regulating whether the services that are provided by them is good or not. So there is a conflict of interest here. All the powers are located within the same body. They are themselves providing education. They are themselves mapping whether they are providing it correctly or not. So this is something not appropriate. Ideally, what should happen is someone should provide the services and someone else should independently regulate it. But that is something which has not been happening. So that is the reason the recent policy, it says that the Department of School Education should only be involved in policy making and overall monitoring. And we can have an independent school standards authority in each state. It should prescribe some uniform standards. And self-regulation accreditation system should be instituted for schools. So standards will be identified by a body, a separate body will be created which will create these standards, and schools will rate themselves as per these standards. So this is what has been recommended when it comes to school regulation, because at present there is conflict of interest, at present there is centralization of powers. So these are some recommendations related to school education. All these points along these lines, recommendations have been made. So we just discussed all these things. Now let's move to the higher education sector. What have been some of the recommendations when it comes to higher education? First thing, gross enrollment ratio in higher education in India is very low. We have seen this in the past as well. And we have seen how some of the countries, for example, countries like US and other emerging economies also perform much better than India. So what we're saying is we have to increase the gross enrollment ratio to 50% by 2035. So now it is almost half of it. We have to double the gross enrollment ratio by 2035. And they're saying that to do this, one of the things that can probably be done is, since it is difficult for many people to access education, why not introduce open distance learning online programs? That way, more people will find it easier to access higher education. Next thing, they talk about structuring of the higher education institutions. So in India, we have again different kind of higher education institutions. Some are exceptional, some are renowned world over, but many of them are not up to the mark. So what they're saying is we need to have a focused approach, and the higher education institutions can be divided into three categories. So first one will be the research universities. They are the ones who are the best, they're the centers of excellence. Here, they will be focused on research as well as teaching. Primarily, they will be focusing on research, but they will also be focusing on teaching. So this will be one tier. The next category will be the teaching universities. Their focus will be primarily on teaching, but yeah, they can also take up research activities, but their focus on research will be less as compared to what the research universities will be focusing on. And thirdly, degree granting colleges. Here, their focus will be only on undergraduate teaching. So they are not going to focus on research, they are going to just provide degrees. So this is how they are going to restructure it. Three kinds of higher education institutions will be there. First one focusing massively on research as well as teaching. Second type of institutions will be focusing on teaching, but yeah, they can do some amount of research. Third one will be primarily focusing on granting degrees. And all higher education institutions should eventually be turned into multidisciplinary universities. So they have been focusing on multi-disciplinary approach to education. This is something that we had also talked about in the past. Most of the problems that we see right now in the society cannot be addressed by the help of one discipline. You need to have a cross-disciplinary, multidisciplinary approach. So that is also what they are talking about. All higher education institutions should eventually be turned into multidisciplinary universities. And by 2030, there should be one multidisciplinary higher education institution in every district in the country. As I just mentioned, the national education policy heavily focuses on multidisciplinary education, and it wants, as I just mentioned, that how many of the issues that we face right now can only be solved if you have a multidisciplinary approach. It wants the next generation, the present generation as well, to focus on learning multiple things. It also provides different kind of flexibilities. So it might happen that a student enrolls himself or herself in a particular course, but then they realize that maybe they also need to learn something else, or maybe their interest lies somewhere else, so they can easily exit. So the national education policy focuses or gives the flexibility of multiple entry and multiple exit. If I enroll in a particular course, higher education institution, and I study there for 1 year, and then I realize that I need to learn something else as well, so I can exit from that particular course and I will be given a certificate, and I can enroll for something else. If I study something for 2 years and I exit, I will be provided a diploma. If I study something for 3 years and exit, I will be provided bachelor's. If I study something for 4 years, I will be provided bachelor's with research degree. So those kind of flexibilities have been included, and this is something which is path-breaking, which has not happened in case of India till now. So these kind of flexibility has been offered. How is the higher education sector going to be regulated? I mean, this has been one of the major issues when it comes to higher education. The Yashpal Committee report, the Standing Committee of Parliament, so they have all flagged issues when it comes to the governance, the regulation of higher education in case of India. So the national education policy has some recommendations along these lines as well. It says that we need to set up a Higher Education Commission of India, and it is going to have 4 independent verticals, and these 4 independent verticals will be carrying out different kind of functions. One of the vertical will focus on regulation, one of the vertical will focus on accreditation, one will be focusing on funding, giving funds to different education institutions. And apart from that, you also need to have independent bodies which can set different kind of academic standards. So what they're saying is there will be one body, National Higher Education Regulatory Council, which will act as a single regulator, but it will not be regulating legal and medical education. We'll have separate bodies for that. Apart from that, everything else, all other education, it will be regulating. Then you will have a National Accreditation Council, which will be accrediting different institutions. Again, it will be ranking different institutions depending on their performance. Then the Higher Education Grants Council will be providing disbursing funds, grants to higher education institutions. General Education Council, it will specify the curriculum framework, learning levels for higher education. So four independent verticals, and all these things will come under the Higher Education Commission of India. And in case there is any dispute between all these bodies, it can be resolved by experts, by the body of experts, Higher Education Commission of India. So it's going to be a dispute resolution body if there's a dispute between these verticals. Now, another major concern when it comes to India is research. We have seen this before as well, how in India we do not have sufficient investments when it comes to research, how research is something which has not been a priority area in case of India. Now, this is something which reflects it. In case of India, total investment in research and innovation is hardly 0.69% of the total GDP. Just compare it with countries like South Korea, Israel, USA spends around 2.8% of its GDP on research, South Korea 4.2%, Israel 4.3%. In case of India, it is not even 1%. So this is a major challenge, and the National Education Policy also recognizes this. And it says that we need to have a separate fund, a National Research Foundation. It will be tasked with funding and facilitating quality research in India. Another thing which has been in the news for some time now, before the National Education Policy, that some committees they had also talked about this, that we need to have more foreign universities to come and participate in India. That way, we will have the best of teachers, professors teaching here. We'll have the best of methods being adopted when it comes to higher education institutions. And again, students in India don't have to spend a lot of money to go outside and study. So we have been thinking of having more foreign universities in case of India, and the National Education Policy has also mentioned this, and it says that we need to encourage global universities to come and operate in India. And they're saying that they will be permitting global universities to operate in India. They will provide different kind of exemptions from regulatory and governance norms so that they can easily set up their bases here. Apart from that, another thing they're also saying that some of the top universities from India, which have been the best performing universities, they should also be encouraged to set up their campuses in other countries. So two-way exchange can happen. Vocational education is also something which has been in the news for a while now. In case of India, very few people get vocational education. Less than 5% of our workforce in the age category 1924 receives vocational education. Compare it with a country like South Korea, where 96% of the population gets vocational education. If you add India and South Korea together, then you're getting 100%. That kind of low number we have. So they're saying that we need to integrate vocational education in all our school and higher education institutions, and this should happen in a phased manner over the next 10 years. These are some major recommendations when it comes to higher education institutions. The focus is on multidisciplinary education. The focus is on changing the regulatory structure right now, increasing the gross enrollment ratio, and again, how do we improve investments in research? How do we have more foreign universities come and participate in India? How Indian universities can go abroad? And yeah, vocational education is also something which has been recognized as a matter of prime importance. So this is about higher education. Now, the National Education Policy also talks about some other dimensions. Let's look at that. Financing of education. So it says that in case of India, the total spending on education should be increased to 6% of GDP. Total public investment in education. That means the spending that is from the side of the central government, from the side of the state government, should become 6% of GDP. But one thing I would like to point out here is the National Education Policy of 1968, National Education Policy of 1986 also mentioned the same thing, that we need to, the public spending, that means the spending by the center and the state government should be 6% of GDP. So before also we have made these promises, before also we have mentioned these things, but it has not happened. The maximum that we have spent is somewhere around 4.3% or a figure like that. We have not spent more than 5% definitely. Then they're saying we need to focus on adult education. In case of India, because of different kind of hurdles, many people have not been able to take up education. They would have faced different kind of challenges. They would have had those kind of dilemmas, whether they should earn a livelihood or whether they should continue education. So those kind of challenges people have faced, and they would have decided on earning a livelihood. Now probably they're earning the livelihood. Maybe we should also focus on providing them some sort of education. So their National Education Policy says that we need to develop a national curriculum framework for adult education, and this should focus on a few skills, a particular kind of skills. First thing is they should be taught different kind of foundational literacy, numeracy, basic things. Then they should also be given education. They should also be provided some critical life skills, for example, financial digital literacy skills, healthcare and family awareness. These are also very important, given that the kind of times that we have to use technology at different points of time. So basic amount of financial digital literacy is very, very important. Apart from that, from the public health aspect, healthcare and family awareness is also very important. Some vocational skills needs to be provided. It can make them more, it can increase their demands in the labor market. And some basic education needs to be provided, which should be equivalent to middle and secondary education. And other things, they should be engaged in different courses in arts, technology, sports, culture. So they can continue their education along different lines. So the national curriculum framework for adult education should include all these components. Now, as we have recently observed as well, how technology has become very, very important part in education. I mean, maybe technology was definitely important in education before as well, but the pandemic has made things completely different. Now it's not just a matter of choice, it has become a matter of necessity now. Technology is very important, but how do we use technology? To what extent we should use technology? How much technology should be leveraged? These are some critical questions that needs to be raised. So what they're saying is we need to create a national educational technology forum. It's going to be a body which is going to facilitate decision making on the induction, deployment, and use of technology. So technology can also be two-way sword. It can help, at the same time it can also create issues. It can make things difficult for some. For example, if you're heavily relying on technology for delivering education, those who are affluent, those who are in the urban areas, those who are young, those who belong to, not disadvantaged communities, they're going to get benefited. But those who are economically doing not that good, those who are in the rural areas, those who belong to socially disadvantaged categories, they might face the brunt. They might not be able to access education. There exists a digital divide already, which can make things difficult for people to access education. So we have to take different calls. We have to take some tough decisions. How much technology you're going to use and how to use it. So you need to have a separate body, National Education Technology Forum, to do this thing. Apart from that, how do we introduce digital education? How do we encourage more digital education? So they're saying that we need to probably think of different alternative modes of quality education. How can provide education when in-person education is not possible? So they're saying that we have to probably develop two-way audio video interfaces for holding online classes. We need to create digital repository of coursework, learning games, simulations through virtual reality. Explore different other channels that is possible. Create different kind of virtual labs. Also, all these things will be eventually useful when your teachers are trained to use these things. So train teachers on how to become high quality online content creators. This is also extremely important. So all these things has been taken up, has been considered in the National Education Policy 2020. These are all the dimensions apart from the focus on school education and the higher education. These are all the other dimensions. Now, why the National Education Policy is significant? How it has been a marked departure, or how it shows a marked departure from what we have been doing in the past. Now, first thing, it focuses on formative years. The Right to Education Act, as I told you, focused on the age category from 6 to 14 years, while the National Education Policy is talking about those in the age category 3 to 6 years as well. So preschool education, which had not been the focus of our national education policies or different kind of schemes programs in the past, has now become the focus area. So formative years are important. Second thing, vocational courses. Vocationalization of education has been given importance. Time and again, it has been pointed out that the kind of workforce that we are creating, it is not employable. It doesn't have the requisite required vocational skills. They are maybe literate, but they're not employable. They might be educated, they might not be employable. These kind of things, these kind of statements have been made by many industry leaders that they're finding it difficult to get quality workforce. So this education policy focuses on vocational training, and this vocational training will not only be imparted in higher education institutions, will also be imparted as part of the school curriculum. Next thing, it also talks about the issues with governance, the issues with regulation. A lot of powers was concentrated in certain bodies. For example, UGC, there was a lot of concentration of power. Now you have come up with different other bodies. For example, Higher Education Commission of India. Under that, you have different independent verticals. They have their own area in which they're going to work. Someone is going to regulate, someone is going to give the accreditation, someone else is going to give the funds, distribute the funds. So the concentration of power that was there will be taken care of, and this is something which can prevent corruption and other malpractices. Next thing, focuses on multidisciplinary approach, which is also very, very important, as I have told before as well, that most of the problems that we see right now in the society cannot be solved if you are an expert in one discipline. You need to know multiple disciplines, then only you can solve address problems. There's also a good amount of focus on those who are from the disadvantaged sections. It recognizes the fact that even though we are having universal enrollment, even if we are providing free and compulsory education, there are certain sections of the population who face unique disadvantages, they face unique challenges. Among them, the gross enrollment ratio remains low. It has been diminishing among them. If you look at the out-of-school children, you'll find that from some communities, the portion of out-of-school children is much more. It recognizes that. Accordingly, it talks about different kind of targeted interventions. It also talks about creating special education zones for them. Also, one very important part is it recognizes that students should have the freedom. It recognizes that children should have choice. They should decide. The education system should be flexible enough to give sufficient amount of freedom to students. The multiple entry, multiple exit system is something which is completely unique, which has probably not been experimented in the context of India. And it is not only going to help people gain different kind of skills across discipline, it can also make it easy for dropouts. So this is also something which is unique. Apart from that, the last point, it is also going to open up our education system, our higher education sector to foreign universities. This can be something which can indirectly benefit the entire higher education sector, in the sense that we can have access to some of the best professors, we can have access to some of the best methods, and I think the quality of learning is good because of these foreign universities. It can also lead to higher competition between higher education institutions, as a result of which the national universities, the domestic universities can also start performing better. Again, yeah, I mean, there can be caveats, there can be issues here, but there can be unintended consequences. But if things pan out, if actually higher education institutions come and set up their business in India, it can be something which is beneficial. So this is how the national education policy is something which is extremely significant. But yeah, I mean, not everything can be rosy, and there can be different kind of hurdles, there can be different kind of challenges as well. So what we'll do is look at some of the issues, challenges, some of the roadblocks in implementing national education policy. The national education policy talks about spending 6% of GDP on education. In fact, most of the things that it talks about, right, creating different institutions, creating different bodies, it will require massive investment in education. And we have seen that in the past, the previous national education policies that we have had, they also talked about spending 6% of GDP on education. But has it happened? It hasn't happened. So many of the provisions that we have under the National Education Policy of 2020 hinges on spending 6% of GDP on education. Again, we don't know whether it will materialize. And given the fact that right now our fiscal scenario is also not good, we are all dealing with the pandemic, and again, there have been multiple factors. We have seen how the GDP has contracted. Spending 6% of GDP on education might be difficult. Also, the National Education Policy does not clearly mention the commitments from the side of the center, from the side of the state. How much the center is going to commit, how much the state should be spending. All these things are not mentioned. So how will you hold the center or the states accountable? How will you ensure that the state and the centers will spend 6% of GDP, and what should be that division between them? So all these things are not specified in the National Education Policy. So implementing it might be very, very difficult. And given that education is something which is on the concurrent list, there remains a huge task of consensus building among states. Or else, why will the states be willing to spend this much amount of money on education? And given that it is basically a policy which has been passed by the center, and in recent times, we have seen that there has been an increase in trust issue between center and the states, GST, compensation, all these things we have seen. Getting the states to invest so much in education on the basis of a policy made by the center might be difficult. Next is medium of instruction. It is not compulsory, but as per the National Education Policy, till standard 5, the local language mother tongue should be used for teaching children. Again, this has become a contentious issue. Language has been a major issue in the last few years, and there is a fear that this is something which can lead to language imperialism. Also, not only that, if children are taught in English, for example, it ensures that we have a linked language between kids from different parts of the country. We might lose out on that. Also, we have observed that how a language like English has been significant in ensuring social mobility. Again, we might be protecting our culture, our own local languages, but English is very important when it comes to ensuring social mobility. How English is something which is aspirational, how it opens up different kind of job opportunities later on if you're good in English. So all these things we might miss out on. And also think of those people who migrate from one state to another, or those who have transferable jobs. Children of these people might find it difficult when they're moving from one place to another. So the medium of instruction can be important, and it might, it can be again to its sword. Next thing, there can be different kind of legal complexities involved in implementing the National Education Policy. So we have a law, Right to Education Act. As per this, free and compulsory education should be provided to those in the age category 6 to 14 years. But the National Education Policy talks about universalization of education for those who are in the age category 3 to 18 years. So that can be a challenge. And also, the National Education Policy talks about universalization of education for those in the age category 3 to 18 years. But how will you ensure this if it is not a legal right? It needs to have some legal backing, which is not the case. Right to Education Act is not for those who are in the age category 3 to 18 years. So it might not have that teeth. The policy might just remain like that on paper. Next one, this entire policy seems a lot centralized. It remains heavily centralized. And again, in case of India, you have huge amount of diversity. One particular law deciding everything might go against the creativity, might suffocate local autonomy as well. So in case of India, we have 40,000 colleges. If all of them are following the same standards, somewhere creativity and autonomy can get impacted. Also, there is a question whether we have a sufficient amount of infrastructure right now, or have we been building sufficient infrastructure, and also do we have the capacity to build sufficient infrastructure in future? you. I mean, if you're saying that you need to increase the gross enrollment ratio by 100%, right now it is less than 25 now, and you're saying that by 2035 it needs to be 50%. Do we have that capacity to build that much amount of infrastructure? Same thing we are saying for higher education institutions. We need to have multiple institutions in each and every district. So again, it might not be that easy to do that. Next question is related to human resources. Do we have sufficient human resources who can train the next generation? We are saying that we should have a different kind of subjects. We need to have a multidisciplinary approach to education. But do our teachers have those kind of skills that they can impart multidisciplinary education? Also, we're talking about alternate curriculum subjects like yoga, philosophy, Adivasi indigenous ways of learning. Do we have teachers who can train children along these lines? Okay, and in fact, in many places we do not even have sufficient number of teachers. So quality is second thing. We might not even have the quantity. There have been different independent studies which point out that there is deficit when it comes to number of teachers and professors. So quantity is an issue. On top of that, quality is again another issue. Also, the national education policy talks about multidisciplinary approach. It talks about multiple exit, multiple entry. It talks about all these things. But do we have ways by which children can be guided, students can be guided, so that they can make wise career choices? So that is also something of a concern. Apart from that, we are focusing on digital education, but do we have sufficient digital infrastructure in place? Now also there exists a huge digital divide. People in rural areas, people belonging to socially disadvantaged communities, they find it difficult to access these kind of digital properties. They do not have access to the digital technologies. So it makes it difficult for them. And if you are going ahead with digital education, it can further increase the divide. Another issue we might face is we might educate our population. If you're increasing gross enrollment ratio, yes, we will have more people who are educated. If we do not have sufficient number of jobs to accommodate these candidates who are skilled, who are educated, we might again face different other challenges. All the policy talks about regulation, it talks about governance, it talks about the Higher Education Commission of India, and it talks about the different four verticals that will be set under it, but it is not very clear on the role of UGC and AICT. What exactly will their role be? Will they be disbanded? What they will do? Apart from that, it also seems that the government wants to get a lot of things done out of Anganwadis. We saw that the national education policy is focusing a lot on early childhood care and education, and there we saw that it will have to depend on Anganwadis to provide this particular care and education. But many of these Anganwadis do not even have basic facilities like toilets. The Anganwadi workers are not decently paid, so it might be unfair to overburden Anganwadis. And again, one major question remains: we are trying to improve educational outcomes. We want to get more children to schools. We want to ensure that children don't drop out of schools. But this thing will not happen unless we stop child marriage, unless we abolish or unless we stop child labor. We have prohibited, regulated child labor. We have also abolished child marriage. But in reality, all these things continue, and these are the reasons why children drop out of school. So unless this thing is also taken care of, stopping child marriage, stopping child labor, again, the kind of learning outcomes that we visualize, the kind of educational outcomes we visualize will not happen. So this is also very, very important. So these are some issues which have been flagged by educational experts, researchers, academics, which needs to be taken into consideration. And then only we can probably have concrete steps. Then only we can have concrete solutions for our side for the education sector. So this is about the national education policy. This is about the different provisions we have under national education policy, which was recently accepted by the government, and why it is important and what are some of the challenges that we might face. So since this is the most important policy that has been introduced for the education sector this year, it becomes very, very important, not only from your mains exam perspective, but also from prelims perspective. So keep this in mind, write answers. So solve questions, read more about it. If you come across any op-ed, if you come across any editorial related to national education policy, please note down points if they're different from what we have explained, discussed in this session. So with this, we will wrap up today's session. Thank you. Thanks a lot.